هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله ولو كره المشركون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن كثيرا من الأحبار والرهبان ليأكلون أموال الناس بالباطل ويصدون عن سبيل الله. والذين يكنزون الذهب والفضة ولا ينفقونها في سبيل الله فبشرهم بعذاب أليم. يوم يحمى عليها في نار جهنم فتكوى بها جباههم وجنوبهم وظهورهم هذا ما كنزتم لأنفسكم فذوقوا ما كنتم تكنزون. إن عدة الشهور عند الله 12 شهرا في كتاب الله يوم خلق السماوات والأرض منها 4 حرم ذلك الدين القيم فلا تظلموا فيهن أنفسكم وقاتلوا المشركين كافة كما يقاتلونكم كافة واعلموا أن الله مع المتقين. إنما النسيء زيادة في الكفر يضل به الذين كفروا يحلونه عاما ويحرمونه عاما ليواطئوا عدة ما حرم الله فيحلوا ما حرم الله زين لهم سوء أعمالهم والله لا يهدي القوم الكافرين. يا أيها الذين آمنوا ما لكم إذا قيل لكم انفروا في سبيل الله اثاقلتم إلى الأرض أرضيتم بالحياة الدنيا من الآخرة فما متاع الحياة الدنيا الآخرة إلا قليل.
ما شاء الله. جزاكم الله خيرا. Beautiful recitation by Muhammad. I request all the brothers and sisters to make dua for Hafiz Muhammad. He is currently going through therapy. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him a quick and full recovery from his cancer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala remove it totally from his body without any side effects or if ever returning into his body. Likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give all those who are suffering from illnesses cure. Ameen. So, very apt, verses recited by Hafiz Muhammad from Surah At-Tawbah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually talks about zakat as well. Those who hoard the gold and silver, they don't give it, the punishments will be severe, where they will be stamped with this gold and silver, which will be with the fire Jahannam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save us from this. Inshallah, we'll get straight onto the presentation delivered by Mufti Zakaria, inshallah. Inshallah, through this presentation, we'll go through the basics of Zakat, and thereafter we will have a Q&A. So if anyone has any specific questions they want to ask about Zakat, please keep that in mind. And also, inshallah, we'll try and keep that as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions for the presentation as well, please do put your hands up and Mufti Zakaria accordingly will, inshallah, respond to your questions. Mufti Zakaria. Inshallah.
So is this how it's supposed to look like for me? Hey, do I just click here for next slide? Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Today, inshallah, we will be talking about Zakat, one of the 5 pillars and tenets of Islam. Zakat in the Quran is mentioned alongside Salah in many places. You'll be aware of the ayahs being Salah, Wajib, Zakat, multiple fold mentioned in countless places of the Quran. The importance of Zakat is established through many ayahs of the Quran and Hadith. And it is a natural way of purifying one's wealth as well as helping many needy people. It has been established through various researches also. If every person who is eligible to pay his or her 2.5% will with full giving the zakat out, you that we find that many people lose out on this aspect, and that person himself or herself is also worthy of retribution. After Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Salah, one of the most important responsibilities directly from Zakat. In several places of the Quran, you will see Salah mentioned in such a way. Zakat, the literal meaning of Zakat is pure, an increase. Zakat, the word zakat has these two meanings of purifying and increasing. And both meanings are associated with zakat because it's been mentioned that zakat is taking away the dirt aspect of the wealth in one way. So it's purifying the wealth. Where does the element of increase come in? Allah Ta'ala mentions in the Quran where He says, يَمْحَقُ اللَّهُ الرِّبَا وَيُرْبِي الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah Ta'ala is what a natural belief will be. Allah Ta'ala increases and Allah Ta'ala eradicates interest. ويربي الصدقات and Allah increases sadaqat. In a logical way, if a person looks, when a person is gaining money from interest, he is receiving money. So his wealth is in reality increasing. And a person who is giving out donations to charity, in that reality, his wealth is increasing. So the reality on the outset, you see wealth coming in and wealth going away. But Allah Ta'ala is saying in the Quran,
the laptop, I think.
Allah
Yeah,
makes
it's fucking-
pieces, eradicates what you get
He told me I bought it. So yeah, he told me.
on the other hand,
new
Allah Ta'ala also states, وَيُرْبِ الصَّدَقَاتِ Allah increases
I didn't
sadaqah.
get it from
That
That's
increases
what I
in
think.
two ways. One is by rewarding the hereafter, your gain, and through barakah in your current wealth. Even though you might see 2.5% going away, which will receive more in barakah within the wealth, and your money will last longer. What is zakat? To give a fixed portion each lunar year to the needy Muslims as stipulated in the Quran, and thereby making them the owners of the given. This is what zakat is. The lunar year has been, because as you may be aware, the lunar year is 10 days or 11 days short each year on the current Gregorian calendar that we use. So you will calculate. So let's say some people use first Muharram, some people use first of Ramadan, whichever day, but mainly it will be connected with the days of calculation. When we come to that, inshallah, I will explain that how and where your financial year for zakat will start.
Next one.
On to the
Next one.
one after that. Virtues of giving zakat, we mentioned that Allah Ta'ala mentioned in many places. Now, the benefits of giving zakat. First and foremost, the benefits of giving zakat gain the pleasure of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, increase the incidents where people in volatile situations where there's been riots and stuff, but where a lot of people have been looted, those properties and businesses where the zakat was being given have not been touched, and that is through the barakah of zakat. So zakat also ensures the protection of safety from calamities, security from many misfortunes, and zakat will also provide shelter on the day of judgment. Warning of non-payment of zakah. Go to that. Warning of or after that. One of the ayats recited by our Qari also mentions this aspect. The translation is there. And there are those who hoard gold and silver and do not spend it in the path of Allah. Announce to them the most grievous penalty. On the day of Qiyamah, each will be produced out of that wealth in the fire of Jahannam, and it will be branded on their foreheads and their flanks and their backs. That same wealth we used to brand them on the day of Qiyamah. One of the hadith mentions in Bukhari, whoever is given wealth by Allah does not pay the zakat due thereupon shall find that on the day of judgment the wealth will be made to appear to him as a hairless snake with specks, which chains him and then seizes him by his jaw and says, I am your wealth, I am your treasure. So, zakat, punishment, and retribution in Akhirah also. Next slide. Conditions of zakat to become wajib. First and foremost, a person obviously needs to be a Muslim and a believer for zakat to become obligatory on him. The person also has to be physically mature. Number 3, the person has to be sane. There's no obligation to a person whose sanity is not there. The person has to be free. And number 5, wealth to be in one's possession for 1 lunar year at the beginning and the end of the year to have the start stipulated amount. We come to that as well. Such wealth must be cutable, gold, silver, money, etc. What type of wealth is zakat and what is not? Next slide. Next slide. Prerequisites for zakat. Number 1, the time of giving zakat either should be made or at the time of giving it to agent for this. Sometimes we directly giving it to a person who is a recipient of zakat there at the time of giving. Then she should pay the clock to free zakat. You don't have to inform them. Many times the person will feel a bit bad in that sense that zakat is being given to them, even though he's working out of shame. That person is not saying that he needs money. So you don't have to tell him, look, I'm giving you my zakat. You can give it as a gift and intend in your heart that you give zakat. When the zakat is given, the poor person should be made the owner and recipient, meaning that he should have full control over it physically. Tabligh, the person whose zakat is being given to has to own that money. It can't be lended away. You've seen these people, they take a monthly as zakat, they give it to a person as part of his labor, etc., which is not allowed. Next slide. Categories of zakatable items. What are those aspects of the wealth on which zakat will become obligatory? Gold, number 1, silver, cash, in any form, cash, merchandise, items for resale, stocks, shares, property, and personal pensions. We'll come to that in more detail. Livestock, animals, and agricultural farming aspect in the form of ushr. We'll come to that also, inshallah. Next slide, non-zakatable items. What don't you have to give zakat on? Personal belongings, e.g. clothing, personal car, furniture, house, jewelry that is non-gold and silver. These things won't have zakat. Fixtures and fittings, you have a business, the computers, machinery, delivery trucks, etc. They don't. Only those things that are going to be sold in the business, merchandise. Right. Precious stones, no zakat on them. Diamonds, rubies, emeralds, anything, there's no zakat on them. No zakat on haram income and wealth. Because the ruling, مَكْتُسِبَ بِطَرِيقٍ كَبِيهٍ فَسَبِيلُهُ التَّصَدُّقُ, anything that has been derived through non-legal and Islamic means, that whole portion needs to be given in charity. So that won't be a zakatable asset. Liabilities are also non-zakatable. So there's debts that you have to pay to suppliers, debts to others, etc. There's no zakat on them.
what is meant by nisab? So a person gives zakat when he reaches a specific target. What is meant by it? We need to understand that aspect. So in the next slide, if you look at it, the amount of wealth which makes one liable for zakat is called nisab. There are two types of nisab, a silver nisab and a gold nisab. Gold, if it reaches the value or the amount of 87.48 grams, which is 20 mithqal, in today's value, looking at the price 2 days ago, was 3,851 pounds and 74 pence. That is based on 87.48 grams of gold. Silver, the value of silver or the amount is 612.36 grams of silver, which is about 200 dirhams. In the value, current value, I think it was 61 pence a gram. So based on that, it's about 373.53 pounds. That is how much silver or the value of silver on which zakat becomes obligatory. Now, based on these two aspects, which one do you use? Because there's a great difference between 3,000 and 373. If you have only gold and you don't have any cash assets and so, then your syllabus of zakat will be valued on that gold. So you'll pay if your wealth is exceeding 3,851 pounds. If you own mixed zakatable assets, you've got cash, you've got some gold, you've got silver, then you'll look at the least one because it's anfa'al al-fuqara, it's more beneficial for the poor if you're paying at this lower line of poverty rate. So if anybody has mixed assets, they've got some shares, they've got some gold, they've got some silver, they have cash at home or in bank accounts. Now putting that together, if it exceeds 373 pounds 53, then you will work out zakat based on that. Now, we mentioned earlier, one of the preconditions was that that asset is with you for a year. If you look at the next slide, you can work out your Zakat anniversary. Now, the Zakat anniversary is the date, the first time you reach that target. Let's take the 373 pound target. So anybody who reaches that target and is physically mature, boy or girl, becomes the owner of that stipulated amount, the nisab. They will then calculate for the next year, or keep in mind that if their wealth is the same time the following year, as long as they don't hit zero, the following year, if that same time they own that same amount or more, then they will be working out zakat. If, however, they hit zero, then you have to wait to get to that amount again before you look for another year. That is what is meant by a year. A lot of people get confused and think that when it's stipulated that you should have the wealth for 1 year, that means that every item you're getting has to be with you for a year. And that practically is very hard, because a person who's getting paid weekly, then for every week's amount, he's got to keep accounts for the year, whether that money has been with him or he spent it. And that's not practical. Hawlan hawl, as described in the books of Fiqh, that the money should spend with you a year, it means that the minimum stipulated amount, which is 373, is something that you hold with you for the duration of the year. And even in there, it will fluctuate. You might go up and down a bit on this line, but as long as you don't hit zero and you spend a year, where you come back to the same date the following year and that money has been with you, then you have become eligible to pay zakat, and then you will look at your assets. So if you look at that sort of graph, go on to the next slide, it will explain more better, yes. If you look at this, the red line here is that amount, the syllabus amount. Let's say it's the 373 amount. So in Ramadan, you hit that amount, now you want to look for it. But what happened, after 1 or 2 months, you came to zero again. And in the month of Safar, you went on to 373. Now, your balance fluctuated, it went below and then it went to increasing, but it didn't hit zero. And following Safar, you had double, triple that amount. So, you'd be paying zakat the following 1st of Safar, according to the Islamic calendar. You can't work with the English calendar also, just reduce 10 days or 11 days each year, if you can't remember the Islamic date. But roughly, that is how your zakat year and anniversary will be looked at. Now, if a person has not calculated and adhered to maintaining a record, and they can't remember where their finances are, then that person will do a rough estimate through bank accounts where you can look it up on your statements, etc., or make a rough guess that I was earning so much and I must have reached this target at so and so date, depending on your expenses, and then work your zakat accordingly. The rates of zakat are different in gold and silver. The current market rate, I haven't updated, the current market rate for gold is 3,851. And for silver, it's 373 pounds. In this instance, an nisab for silver will be set because this will benefit the poor and needy more, and people will fall into the threshold of being liable to pay zakat on this year. In the next slide, it tells you why we're taking the lunar year. It is a condition of zakat being payable that 1 lunar year is completed after becoming owner of the nisab, and that remains in your ownership till the end of the year. Once a person remains the owner of nisab for 1 full year, completion of 1 year is not necessary on each amount he acquires during that year. He must pay zakat on the balance he owns at his valuation date, even though some amount is acquired only 1 day before your calculation date. So let's say today is your calculation date. Yesterday you received 10,000 pounds from inheritance or anything. Now, even though it's just been received 1 day before, zakat still will become obligatory. Why? Because it's within your financial year and it's become part of your assets. Okay? Next slide, the example on the 10th of Muharram. Let's say somebody is calculating 10th of Muharram 1441, a person owned 500 pounds, free of any liabilities. The amount being above the nisab, he has now become owner of the nisab. Throughout the year, this amount increased and decreased, but never became zero. On 7th of Muharram 1442, he owns the Cutable assets of 700 pounds. On 8th of Muharram, he receives 300 pounds. Now, on the 9th, his zakatable assets is 1,000 pounds. That includes the 300 he received a day earlier. So on the 10th of Muharram, which is his anniversary for nisab, he must pay zakat on 1,000. So 2.5% of that 1,000 is what that person will give in zakat. Next slide, merchandise. For merchandise at the end of the lunar year, its present market value should be determined. So a person, it doesn't have to be merchandise in the sense that it's a shop owner or a person who has a business who's got merchandise. Individuals who aren't business owners or businessmen, if they purchase something with the intention to sell it on, then that item will be classified as merchandise. And when you're calculating on your Zakat anniversary, you will include that the market value on that day of that particular item as part of your assets. What will be classified as merchandise? Number one, clear intention to resell. When you purchase, your clear intention was that you are going to resell this item when you get profit or you get a good price. So then the asset effectively represents stock in trade, and therefore the entire value of the property or asset will be, stock will be subject to zakah. On the other hand, if you have clear intention to retain that asset, investment property, you're not going to sell it, you're going to invest it, then on the property itself, there's no zakat. Yes, the rent gained from that will be zakatable, but not the actual property. Or third intention, you bought the property for personal use, you're going to reside in it. No zakat, because it's a personal use item, it's not classified as merchandise. Next slide. You have no clear intention when you're purchasing it. Your intention is not clear, you just found a good price and you purchased it. You haven't decided what you're going to do with it. Then, no zakat payable on the asset value, but income received from there, you will pay zakat on it. Business owners, zakat payable on stock and cash only, not on goodwill or on capital, equipment, property, etc. So people who own businesses, they won't pay zakat on fixtures, fittings, computers, machinery, etc. Anything that is part of the stock that is going to be sold, you will pay zakat on. Properties, zakat is only payable on net rental income unless the property has been purchased to sell on. If that is the case, then the value of the property will be taken into consideration. Right, next slide on pensions. Each aspect of pension will be judged based on that, but two categories of pensions, if you look at them. The first one, defined benefit scheme, like the NHS, state pensions, final salary, care. All these are non-zakatable during employment despite pension deductions from salary. The number two is defined contribution, money purchase, personal pension plans, group personal pension, additional voluntary contributions, self-invested personal pensions, stakeholder pensions, zakatable during the employment while it's contributing. Ideally, Muslims who invest in defined contribution pension schemes should review their funds fact sheet, the precise Cutable assets composition should be determined to calculate the zakat liability. We'll come into more detail on this. Why the difference between the two? A defined benefit scheme is viewed by scholars as a deferred salary. It's not something you actively contribute to or even control, whereas standard workplace pension is an investment that you're making monthly contributions to and is being done for your benefit. One has effectively allowed and volunteered to cede control to an investment manager with the express motivation of growing a portfolio on behalf of oneself. So there is a clear wealth that is subject to growth, and it's a pot of specific investment with a definable value held in the individual's name. Even though one does not have complete possession, the characteristics of such schemes have led scholars to conclude that they fulfill sufficient criteria to be considered zakatable. So based on this, you'll categorize which type of pension one is holding. In a very nutshell, all that if it's something that has been done with your consent and you have control over it, you will pay zakat on it. Something that is part of employment where you do not have any say and you don't have control over those funds, such pensions, there's no zakat. Shares. Different approaches on shares. One is you will pay where you've purchased with the intention of selling immediately, you'll pay the market value of that share. Or you might end up paying the zakatable assets where you purchase the shares to hold, not to sell. Then you will need two aspects on there. You will look at what assets are zakatable in the shares that you are holding. I'll explain that one detail later on. And number three, you might end up paying 40% of those alongside your dividends and thing. If you look at the next slide, zakat on shares is based on the intention of purchase. If they have been bought to sell, zakat will be paid on the market value of that share. If one has purchased the shares as a long-term investment and not to sell them, but to take benefit from the dividends, then they will pay zakat on the dividends and the portion of the business that is zakatable. Pensions. In here I've shown the two types, the non-zakatable and the zakatable. It's more or less what we've mentioned, a defined benefit, whether final salary or career average, no ownership of assets, only rights to receive a pension or deferred salary, mandatory deductions, liability. It's explaining what it is. In there, there's no zakat. The other one is zakatable, a defined contribution, where ownership is established via possession of third party, choice to opt in or out, where it is invested, you have a choice to make also. So these two categories, but like I said, you will look at each, the terms of conditions of how you're entering into that deduction, etc., to find out whether the pension is zakatable or not. Next slide, debt and zakat. How do those things go? People, like we've looked at the assets aspect, the gold, silver, the pensions, the shares, the stocks, then you also get debt. As a general principle, all payable debts may be deducted from one's zakatable assets. These include the following: the price of goods purchased, something you've already purchased and you've got to make payment for, because that you now owe, you have received the goods. You won't put in here something you're going to purchase, because you haven't received that item, therefore you do not owe anything for that item. It's something you've purchased, now you become liable to pay the value of that item. Rent of properties that has become due. You owe the rent of a property and the term for that rent is now due. So therefore, that will become part of your debt, because the person will, whether you even vacate that property now, because you've used the property, you will have to pay zakat on it. That will be considered part of your debt. Salaries or wages due or overdue on valuation date. So you own a business and on that date, there is salaries you have to pay out to your workers. So that will be part of your debt. Personal loans, will form part of your debt. Now, there is a difference between personal loans and long-term loans, where, for instance, it's a deferred payment that you have to pay in installments. In such cases, you will look at only that month's installment or that year's installment. For instance, mortgages and installment-based debts. Now, you get a mu'ajjal and a mu'ajjal, a immediately due debt, and a debt which is installment-based. Now, those that are installment-based, you will only look at what you have to pay. So, in a mortgage, your liability on your assets is that year's payments only, because you'll be paying your mortgage over, let's say, 25 years, and it might be £100,000. You've got £20,000 of assets. You won't deduct and say, I'm in minus because I owe 100,000 bank to a so-and-so lender, because the stipulated amount you're paying, let's say, is £500 each month. You'll only look at £6,000 as your liability, because that is that year's payment. Debt owed to oneself. The next slide. All outstanding receivable debts are subject to zakat. People owe you money. Until now we discussed you owing money to other people, but there is people owing money to yourself. All outstanding receivable debts are subject to zakat except for bad debts. Bad debts meaning dayn da'if, where you do not feel that you're going to get that money back. If that is not the case, then any outstanding debts that are owed to you will be liable for zakat, because it's like that money is in a bank account. You don't have it, but it's with somebody, and that person is going to give you that money back, so it forms part of your assets. Even if you have given qarz-e hasana, loan to a masjid or a madrasa or a good project, you will still pay zakat on that, because that money is going to be received by you. One does have the option to pay zakat each year on that amount, or wait for the money to be received and calculate your zakat for previous years. Calculation of zakat. So first you will need to look at your assets. What is your asset? You have, let's say at home, you have a petty cash amount of £200. Cash in hand, £2,000. Cash in the bank, £3,500. Debtors that owe you money is £300. Total assets of £16,000. Calculation. You have these assets, and then there's your liabilities. Forget the first one, merchandise. We won't look at that for now. Amount owed by you to creditors is £8,000, let's say, because you bought some stuff and you've got to pay for that. So your liability is 8,000, and you have assets of 16,000. So if you look at the next slide, subtract the value of the liabilities. These are that are exempt of zakat. So your assets were 16,000. We said you had liabilities to pay of 8,000. So you only have 8,000 as asset left. So step 3, calculate 2.5% or 1/40th of that, which is £200. So your zakat for that year is £200. Categories of zakat. 'Who you will give zakat to. All these categories are mentioned in the Noble Quran. Fuqara, those who own property in excess of basic necessities but below the value of nisab. Their assets are below the value of nisab. Now, one point here, basic necessities. In here, you are defining the poverty line in Islam. What is the poverty line? Who will be classified as a faqir, a pauper, who is worthy of receiving zakat payments? So that has been established here, that the person, if you look at his assets, his gold, silver, cash, and any stock, such stock won't exist for that person to be a faqir. And you'll also look at another aspect, which is stuff which is beyond his basic necessity. What is that? Anything which he would rarely use, stuff which in that whole year he will not be using. For instance, there's pots and pans in the house that they don't use in the whole year. It's just there because somebody gave that to him. Now that item in the house is beyond his necessity. In this day and age, the person has two phones, two mobile phones. One phone will be classified as necessity. The other phone, unless let's say one is his work phone and one is his personal phone, but if that is not the case, the extra phone is more than his basic necessity. A person has a car as a mode of transport, but they have two cars. So one will be necessity, the other will be extra. So when you're drawing the line of a faqir, so you take that 373 pounds, that is the poverty line. So if their assets do not reach that, and in the assets should include stuff which is more than his basic necessity, and that person still is below this poverty line, then such a person can receive zakat money. Number two, masakin, person of extreme poverty who possesses no wealth whatsoever. So the difference between the faqir and miskin, the faqir has some assets, but not as much as what would reach the nisab. The miskin, however, is a person who has no wealth whatsoever. Al-amilin is a zakat collector, person appointed by the Islamic State to collect zakat, who are paid from the Baytul Mal, and they can be paid from zakat collected by the Baytul Mal. Even though they may not be needy Muslims, they can be paid from the zakat money. A stark difference of opinion there, but most scholars believe that charities who are collecting zakat don't fall under this category. So they will not be able to take admin costs from that zakat. Mu'allafatul qulub, those poor and needy people who are given zakat with the intention of solidifying their hearts because they may have recently converted to Islam or to bring them closer to Islam. An aspect at the time of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when new people coming into Islam needed to be solidified and they needed to be won over in a way with some form of financial support. So such people were known as mu'allafatul qulub. Number 5, al-riqab. Again, a category which does not exist. The slaves whose masters have agreed to set them free on a payment of a fixed amount. Such slaves could be helped through zakat to gain their freedom. Number 6, Ibn Sabil, a traveler who, whilst wealthy at his residence, is stranded and in need of financial assistance. So a person who is a traveler, he's lost assets or his money and credit cards have got stolen, he's got no way of tapping into his funds back home. Such a person can be helped through zakat. Even though at home he might be a wealthy person, but currently in his situation, he is in need. Al-Gharimin, number 7, a person whose debts exceeds his assets and his net assets after deducting his liabilities below the nisab limit. To determine whether a person qualifies, his basic necessities of life, house, furniture, clothes, vehicle, will not be taken into account. Okay? And number 8, fi sabilillah, the person who is away from home in the path of Allah Ta'ala. For example, he's out seeking knowledge, or he's in the path of Hajj, or something else which is for solely a religious purpose. So such a person, because his assets are not with him there, can be assisted with zakat if they are in need. So these are the 8 categories where zakat can be disseminated. One question asked is many a times, should you go abroad or give locally? From the hadith mentioned, in which Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentions about zakat, that it will be tu'khadhu min aghniyaihim wa turaddu ila fuqaraihim, that zakat will be taken from their wealthy and given to their poor. A lot of scholars derive from there that the priority should be for your local needs first and then outside. However, if a person still went abroad and gave zakat, that will still be accepted. Priority should be given to immediate needs. And that will also include people within your family. Many a times, people that you know, friends and family, have fallen into debt. They can be supported through zakat, and there's a double reward. One is fulfilling that aspect of family and rahim, and also the fulfillment of zakat. Persons to whom zakat may not be given to. Zakat cannot be given to non-Muslims. So that's why if a person is a charity worker and they've gone to a place where there's mixed people, they've got to make sure that zakat is only going to Muslims. Sadaqat, nafil sadaqat, can be given to non-Muslims, but zakat has to be given to a Muslim. It can't be given to a wealthy person. Now here by wealthy, a person who is above that poverty line of 373, which we discussed earlier. Number 3, it is not payable to the family of Nabi Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Banu Hashim. Number 4, one's family, meaning father, grandfather, and up. And similarly, his furu, meaning his children and grandchildren and below. These 2 aspects of the family can't be given zakat to. Any uncles, cousins, aunts, you can give zakat to. Number 5, one may not pay zakat to a deceased person, nor buy his shroud and kafan or pay for burial expenses with zakat. Because one of the conditions of zakat is that the person whom zakat is given to, we mentioned earlier, has to become owner of the zakat. And the deceased here can't become owner because he is now deceased. Some rules of zakat. One may give zakat to one's brothers, sisters, uncles, aunties, nephews and nieces, parents, in-law. However, they should be needy. That needs to be established. Many times people are just told, oh, that person's very poor, and you don't really investigate. That's not right. You should look at whether his assets or basic necessity items and stuff do allow him to be a needy person. Preference should be given to a relative, as Islam greatly emphasizes on the virtue of family ties. Zakat cannot be given in lieu of services rendered as wages. So, and this happens in back home. I've noticed a lot of people in our Indian subcontinent where people have a tendency of making people labor and then they'll have zakat money and they'll give that as part of their payment for the work. That is not allowed. Zakat cannot be used for the building of hospitals, schools, masajid, or for the administration purposes or payment of salaries for welfare organizations. Like mentioned earlier, zakat has to go in the tamlik of an individual. So it can't be used for public work. You can't pay with zakat to have a well dig somewhere or for water sources, because there's no, yes, if that well is being owned by an individual who is poor and needy, then that well can be, that money can be used for that particular well. Zakat could be given in cash or kind. So it doesn't have to be, for instance, you've got gold, you won't take a portion of your gold to give you a zakat. You don't have to. You can do, but you can pay in cash or kind. You can, with zakat, buy, let's say, wheat or flour and have that distributed in the poor and needy people. Many a time, sometimes it is more wise to do so that money goes to the family and they can utilize, the items are utilized and eaten by the family rather than money that can be wasted in other aspects. A child of a wealthy father cannot be given zakat. However, when such a child becomes mature in age and does not own wealth to the value of nisab, he may then be given zakat. So, when a child is minor, he is under the rule of the wealthy father, so zakat cannot directly be given to them. That same child becomes mature, reaches the age of puberty. Now, that child is a separate adult. His father's wealth won't impact. You will look at what he owns or she owns. If their assets are below the 373 mark, they would be worthy recipients of zakat. It is best to give one zakat when it is due rather than to wait for Ramadan. So if somebody's calculation date is outside Ramadan, the zakat should be given before Ramadan. You don't wait for Ramadan to come along. Although many people have made their dates based in Ramadan, nothing wrong with that. I think that more or less covers the points I've got to make. Any questions or anything from the... Yes.
I didn't get that. If I have a car for transport necessity, is that liable for zakat?
No.
Okay. But what if my daughter has a car? Because
that is her necessity.
Okay.
So that's not an issue.
Okay.
There's no zakat on cars. There's no, just to be clear. You only look at that extra car if you're poor and somebody is going to give you zakat. So then that zakat, the value of that car will be added if it's an extra car. If it's a car that is of that person's need, then that won't be looked at. For the normal person, the car and anything extra will not be looked at. You won't place zakat on that.
One other thing, you said pension. So if your company scheme pension, he's totally in charge of it. You don't have any access until you retire at 65. So that's not zakat, even if you're contributing 4%, because they'll contribute 6%.
Now again, you'll go back to that aspect where when you are employed by the company, you have no say. The company's policy is that they contribute to a pension on your behalf, and that will go towards your pension when you reach that age. Then there's no zakat on it.
Only thing I like to say, a lot of people don't realize this. I see this. The pension, you can say, I want Islamic compliant, because then you physically can't swap the fund, but they don't do that for you. So, like, for example, I just look, I will only do it if it's Islamically allowed, but I can't do certain shares because of this. I can't do the fund. So what they said is you have to physically form the company, the pension fund. But luckily now a lot of Muslims have this issue, so they cover for our needs.
Right. Just on that again, like I said, if you don't have say it's company policy, you don't have an option that money goes to that, then there's no zakat on it. But if that company has a flexibility in that aspect where when you are employed, they ask you whether you want to be part of the pension fund. And with your choice, your money starts getting deducted. Then because that is like you have appointed a third party to invest on your behalf, then you will pay zakat on that pension fund. Yes.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. Question is on pension again. You were talking about zakat being payable on the fund. What do you mean by that? Is it the value of the fund, or is it the value you will get when you retire?
Right. What you, if it falls under the category where you're going to pay zakat on that pension fund, then you will pay at the current value. Because what you will get then, because sometimes the employers say, okay, when you become eligible, you get a windfall of X amount, and then you'll get installments. So what you're going to get then is irrelevant at this current time, because you only look at your current assets that you pay zakat on. Now your current asset is what your pension holder will say on a statement that this is what your pension fund has. That is what you will pay zakat on.
That's the actual pot.
Yes, yes. Your individual pot.
Individual pot.
Yeah.
If they give you a transfer value and you're going to transfer it to somewhere else, will it be payable on the transfer value or the pot value as it is with them?
No, if it will be the current market transfer value.
Transfer value, what does that mean?
So
If-
let's say you want to pay that pension out of where it is
Yeah.
and put it somewhere else. So they give you a transfer value.
That is what you,
Which
because,
is different to the actual pot value.
yes.
The defined contribution is the fixed salary that they will give you at the final salary pension.
Correct.
So that's on that amount you define.
Yeah.
That's when they give you a transfer value. Because you're not transferred it, you're not got it yet. It's not your possession. As soon as you transfer that money, then that part of money you have. So
It's
Yeah,
when you
yeah.
actually do that.
Yeah.
It's when you actually do it.
when you actually do it. But at the time, the company is just promising you a future salary. And
Yeah.
So for that, you have no control over that. Right? So there is
No zakat on that.
But if it's a pot of money that you benefit, then you actually gathering money and money, companies putting money in as well. That's a pot of money which can be exhausted at the rate at which you overtake it. That amount of money at the time every year, you need to look at it. Say that's the amount of money which has to pay.
There's a couple of questions online. One was if somebody has gift cards which have money in it, is that zakatable? Amazon vouchers for Humber gives a lot of them out.
Yes, because it's got a monetary value attached, you will pay zakat on it, yes.
And second question was that if somebody buys land and they bought it because it was just for sale, they're not living in it, they're not making a house or anything like that, but they have not a solid intention, but they have an intention that if it does go up in price, maybe I'll sell it, if not I'll just keep it. So they don't have a clear intention, but they do have this much that if the value does go up, then I will sell it. So do they have to pay any zakat on this land?
What you will look at in any purchase, whether it's land or house or any property, what was your intention when purchasing? One, like I mentioned, would be that you are clear that I'm going to sell that at a profit, whenever I get a profit. So that is bought with the sole intention of selling on, you will pay zakat on it. Number two, you didn't buy it to sell, it just so you found it at a cheap price and you decided let me buy it and I'll make use of it. And that use could be anything. I might build on it, I might use it, I might, if need be, sell it, but there is no clear-cut intention at that time. It's just so happened that you saw it as a good asset and you bought it. Then there's no zakat on it. Number 3, you didn't buy to sell at that particular time, but at the back of your mind, when purchasing, you do have an intention that if I get a profit, I will sell it. So if you ask a person, no, I didn't buy it to sell it, but however, if somebody gives me good money, I will buy it to sell it. That still means that you have purchased it to gain profit by sale. So it will fall under that category of something that you want to sell off. Yes, I did come to that. If a person's bought shares for investment to hold on to, he might end up paying about 40% in contribution towards zakat. It works out where, let's say there's £100 worth of shares the person buys. And you will look at, in such cases, because you're not just eating the dividends, you will also be looking at what portion of that company's merchandise is zakatable. So let's say you bought shares in Asda. Now, you will need to look at, because those shares you haven't bought with the intention of selling on. If that was your intention, you will be paying zakat on the market value of those shares. You won't look at anything else. However, if you bought those shares that I'm going to keep them, I'll benefit from the dividend and I'll hold on to. So you have in reality bought a percentage of that company. So your zakat is not just your dividends. Your zakat is also the zakatable items of that share value. So if you are, let's say you have a 10% stake in such a building by holding on to those shares, then you will look at the annual accounts of that particular business and establish how much of their assets is zakatable and how much is not. In such cases, the scholars have said that it is safe to give 40% value in zakat. That is the 40% rule. Some say, no, don't look at the 40%, just go to their accounts and they will tell you the value of merchandise, divide it by the percentage of shares you have and pay zakat on that. So there's a variation of the thing, but in that, the secure one mentioned by a lot of scholars is to give 40% of the value.
40% of the value of that share at that time.
Yes.
And this is back to pension. The majority of pension comes from share-based.
Yeah.
Small proportion is cash. So the cash bit, you got to give zakat on all of it. The share-based, then you can take 40% of the value of the pension pot. And the 40%.
No. Then again, it will be very confusing if a person will be losing his money.
Value, the amount of zakat you give
No.
the pension pot will be.
Because that person he is going to look at the value, market value, and give 2.5% of that. Because he is going to be receiving not that stock or anything, he is receiving the monetary value of those things. So for such a person, you will only be looking at 2.5% of the market value. That's why a lot of people are not taking that 40% aspect. They only look at 2.5% of the assets. That's why I didn't really elaborate on that too much.
So, you're talking about my question is 21. I want to take you back to the topic about the pension, and I will link that to the land question also. I think we should look at what is practicable and what is possible when you talk about the pension. The money you have in pension, you have what is saving. And most people have this fund there. They don't even have that kind of cash at hand. So they don't have it. Like I have 100,000 in pension, and I don't have enough money. Now considering 2.5% of what I have in pension. So are we going to consider until you receive portion of that pension, or you have to start paying just because you have money? So I need to clarify that.
Right. Again, with pensions, in a nutshell, you need to understand that, and it also is connected with the debt owed to you aspect. One is with the pensions where you do not have control over your finances, there is no zakat. But where, like I mentioned earlier, the money is being put aside with your say and you have a contribution towards it, then you are paying zakat on it. Where you are going to have to pay zakat on your pensions, you can defer payment to when you receive that money. However, because you did have control over that money, you will backdate zakat 2.5% per amount of years you have had that asset. So when you defer payment to when you receive the money, you will backdate for the years you have held that amount of money.
It's not the same amount, it's going to fluctuate if you change.
Yes, so again, don't get it confused with where you do not have control over there is no zakat. This is talking about a pension fund which is done with your control. You have agreed to have certain percentages go towards it, etc. So what you will do each year, you don't have to pay your zakat each year, but keep tabs in such pension funds that this year, let's say, my pension funds, I have to pay £400 of zakat from, let's say, 40,000 that is in my pension pot. So your pension pot is 40,000, and I will be paying 400 from there as zakat, because 1/40th, 2.5% is what you pay as zakat. So for that year's payment, even though you don't have access, you're not going to liquidate that 40,000 to pay that 400. You don't have to pay that 400 there and then at the end of the year, but you know for that year your zakat is £400. Now go forward 5 years, you did that each year. When you get hold of that money, when it's, let's say, a pot of £200,000, for example, you will say, for the past 5 years, what 400, 800, this is the amount of money that's accumulated that I need to give away from zakat from that X amount. So you can hold fire in payment and pay it when you get the pot, or you calculate each year and give it from the money you already have in your possession.
Sorry, I think I made a mistake. The point is not with me. I just said that it has to be the Islamic way. So basically, it will be the non-zakatable one because it's not in my control. It will be in my control when I retire.
Yeah.
So I think that's not zakatable. It's out of our control. We just said it has to be sharia by not interest.
Like I said, each pension scheme needs to be looked at separately to define whether it is zakatable or not.
My question is, so if you've got the project of building something, a house or whatever, and you have funds available for it, have commitment to the builder and so on, but due to administrative things, it takes time, it takes 3 years, let's say, to start building. But that amount of money is locked and waiting for the project to start. Will you pay zakat during these 3 years of this amount?
You will pay zakat on the amount that is not due for payment. For example, with the builder you have an agreement that when 25% of the project is done, I will pay you X amount. And when 50% is complete, I will pay you X amount. And when 75% is complete, I will pay you X amount. And when it's totally complete, I will pay the remainder. You have such agreements because you're not going to keep on giving him money every time he demands for money. So you have an asset of, let's say, 200,000 pounds put away for that house, but you're not due any payment until 25% is complete. When 25% is complete, you are due 50,000 pounds. So your zakat is on 150,000 that you hold, not on the 50,000, because that 50,000 is due to be paid to the builder. The 150,000 is not going to be paid immediately. You'll only pay another 50,000 when 50% is complete. So in any such scenarios, you will look at what is due on you, and that is what you will pay. For a company that is constantly dealing, it is buying merchandise and it is receiving payments for stock that is being sold. It is sometimes hard to calculate. So on the date you will look at, for such a business, let's say the 30th of this month is your Zakat Anniversary. Now in a big company, daily money is going in and daily money is going out. You will have a stack of bills to pay and you will have debtors who have to pay you. So you will look at on that particular day what bills have to be paid because you've already purchased those items. And those will be deducted from your assets. At the same time, to form part of your assets, you will look at what goods have gone out. Those people now owe you. Even though they haven't paid you, they will form part of your assets.
Sisters also have a mic upstairs. If you hold the red button at the bottom of the mic, it will turn the mic on. So if sisters did have any specific questions, you can ask about zakat, inshallah.
Sorry, my question is, if you are a charity and somebody is paying their zakat to you and to help them use it in your country, so can I, if I'm just as myself putting that in, as a responsible person for taking care of someone's zakat, can I give my relative as part of this person's zakat? Thank you.
Yes, if that relative is a worthy recipient of zakat, you are allowed to give them zakat. Yes.
Jazakallah. No other question.
I've got a question about charities, like masjids, waqf. So if they have certain amount of money, if they buy and sell things as business in a charity organization, they don't need to give anything in zakat?
Because there is no individual ownership there. There's no tamlik. So when something is bought on behalf of a trust, which is not owned by anybody, then there is no zakat.
I have two questions there. So, when we are getting zakat from someone, you said you have to do investigation. What is the level of investigation nowadays? For example, do I need to check their bank statement, or is it okay for me to give them zakat if they say that they want, we are eligible for zakat? The second question is, if the nisab is 373, for example, but I give them 500 pounds, is that okay, or I can only give them 373?
First question with regards to your investigation, you will ask basic questions, whether, for example, you know that the current rate is 373, so you can ask, okay, do you possess that amount in cash or kind? And if that person says that no, I don't, then we'll take, you don't have to then say, oh, show me your bank statement. You don't have to do that. As a believer, you will take his, if he's lying, your zakat will be fulfilled and he will be accountable to Allah Ta'ala. So on the outside, we will ask that simple question. If the person confirms, you can pay his zakat. You can't give 500 pounds in one go, which is above 373. That is allowed, no problem whatsoever. However, once you've given that 500 pounds, that person is now above the poverty line. So if a second person knew that that person was in need, that person, second person cannot give him his zakat until he has spent that money and gone below 373. So for the first person, not an issue. And that happens sometimes. A person in your country back home will write to 5-3 people here or email them that I'm desperately in need and I don't have assets and I've got a family wedding coming up or something like that, and can you send me some zakat money? Now 10 different people have received that request and each person said there's zakat money. That's why, as well as the people who are donating zakat need to understand this masail, the poor also need to understand the masail of receiving zakat. It's twofold. Now they don't understand that they are collecting zakat on behalf of multiple people, but only the first person's zakat will get fulfilled. After that, I'm not the recipient of zakat anymore. So in such scenarios, an easy way would be, if let's say 10 people are giving 500 pounds to such a person, that's 5,000 pounds, but only the first person's zakat will be done if it's given separately. However, if one person collects that money on behalf of that person and gives him to him in one go 5,000 pounds, everybody's zakat will be done. So a poor person needs to be understanding of how he is also collecting zakat from other people.
You have to give, you can calculate yourself by the silver. I mean, when you decide if you are eligible to pay, you are using the silver standard. But when you're giving it, the recipient, is it allowed to calculate on the basis of gold? So for the recipient, so you can say that, okay, he's benefiting by setting up the gold standard in that case.
There are some scholars who believe that you should look at the gold nisab for him to benefit more from zakat, and people are looking into that currently also, whether that needs to be extended because of the great variation between gold and silver. But however, many people still believe that because you're using that 373 landmark to give, that should be also for the recipient.
So, see on your Zakat Anniversary, you need to make sure that the money is going to the person on that day, or is there something
Priority should be given to disseminate it ASAP. However, the wise thing would be, because there's no guarantee of you outliving that payment and death can come at any time. And if that zakat is still in your bank account, then friends and family won't know that the zakat still needs to be given. So if for some reason, and many people do this where, because during the year there are different occasions where people might become in need, or there might be certain disasters where you really want to contribute. So the best thing, if you're not going to give it straight away and you're going to give it over a period of time to different needs, then what you need to do is take that money out and categorize it as zakat money. So friends and family are aware that this is a zakat pot that can't be touched and is not part of my assets.
So just a comment on what Sister Usman also mentioned right now. People that collect zakat, they are either the wakil or the representative of the person giving zakat, or they are the representative of the poor people. So if they're the representative of the poor people, and as soon as you give them the money, your zakat is fulfilled. But a lot of charities, they don't have fixed poor people in mind. They're not representing poor people. So they collect money. So don't assume that you've given your zakat and your zakat is fulfilled. It will be fulfilled until it reaches the poor people. So if you are giving zakat as fard, it's your responsibility to make sure that the organization and charity has given it to the poor people. Otherwise you'll be liable, right?
Just to elaborate on that, so you understand this question properly. There's two people who will be proxy or agents. One is the person who is your agent to go and take your zakat and get, for instance, Islamic Relief is an organization that will collect zakat from you. They are acting as your agent because their charity is not working for a fixed poor family or individual. They haven't been appointed by anybody to collect zakat on their behalf. You are appointing them to go and distribute your zakat in a disaster place or something. So they are acting as your agents. And it could be not an organization, it could be an individual also. So that is one type of agent. The other agent is that is coming from such a place where poor people, he is representing those poor and needy or disaster people of that particular area. Now he is coming from there, so he is acting as their agent. As soon as you give money to that person, your zakat is as if you have given it to that poor person, because he is acting on their behalf. But when, and which is the majority case, charities here or individuals here collect your zakat, they are your proxy and agent. So if the money by them is like money being held by yourself. Until they give it to the poor, your zakat is still not given. So you need to be, especially with certain charities who tend to hold on to cash for a longer period, you need to ask the charity whether you will make sure that you will disseminate that zakat within that financial year. Why that is important? If, let's say, you have given 2,000 to a charity or an individual to give to the poor and needy, and when your next Zakat anniversary comes, that person still hasn't given that zakat out, you will need to pay your zakat on this 2,000 also. Because it's as if you're still holding on to that 2,000 pounds. Similarly, with yourself also, you calculated that this year's zakat is 2,000 pounds, for example, and you took that away and put it in an envelope, and you, out of neglect, did not pay zakat on that, you did not give that zakat out. Come next year, same time, you still have that envelope with zakat written on in your book. Then you will have to pay zakat on that 2,000 again. Because you still owe that money, you haven't given it out in zakat, even though you separated it.
It's a short, quick one.
Yeah, you know, you're talking about gift cards. So if it's expired, then would you say it's got no monetary value then?
No.
Yeah, and similar to the pensions one about where you said you don't have access. So if you don't have the money to pay for it, then you pay later on, obviously. So if you buy a house, for example, 500,000, and now you've got no money left, would you just wait until you have money every year? How would you pay off the stuff for that?
House
for resale.
Okay, house for resale. Yeah, what will happen is, for example, you bought it with the house for resale, you don't have money to pay the value of the zakat or its market value, you'll wait for it to be sold. Once it's sold, then you take out the zakat portion from the money you retrieve.
Next question is, if, say for example, today is my zakat day, and I haven't paid my zakat yet, and now somebody gives me £1,000, do I add that in on the same day?
If it's on the day, yes. If it's a day after, no.
Okay, so if I've already paid my zakat now on the day,
Yeah,
and now I get more money, same thing.
you will pay zakat on it because it's still within your financial year.
Thank you for the elaborate interpretation. My question is, for example, my zakat anniversary is suffer, and I have a property which is the rent payment in Ramadan, and I usually spend the money before my zakat based on the amount I have at Safar.
What you have at Safar. What you're going to get in a month's time or 2 months' time, you don't pay zakat. That will look in the next Safar, the next year.
Like I said, I asked my question is that if I calculate, for example, the 2,000 this year, but again I confused. This time, what I do, I give more money or less zakat? Actually, what I calculate, I give this. I pay this. और मतलब तो मैंने कैलकुलेट किया ना 2 लाख फॉर एग्जांपल 2 लाख दे देगा जाकर मेरा कंफ्यूज है ये
सही कैलकुलेशन क्या है?
कैलकुलेशन वो नहीं हुआ इसका नहीं क्या था एग्जैक्टली ये पैसा जमा करेगा
नहीं हिसाब के साथ with calculation you will give zakat on what you feel this is my calculation. If there is an element of doubt that there might be 200 extra, then to get rid of the doubt, you can't give extra. You can't give more zakat than is due. There's no harm. Also, on that point, you can give zakat in advance also. So, your anniversary date is 1st of Ramadan, and somebody came 10 days before Ramadan and asked for some zakat money. You can't give him the zakat which is going to be due in 10 days' time. And then calculate and take that money out, I've already paid that.
Just on that point, zakat, sadaqatul, there's specific amounts. Allah has stipulated 2.5. So you don't give 3% thinking giving zakat. Well, it's specified. Sharia has specified. Otherwise, everyone's going to do, let me give 5%. You can give extra, it's fine, it'll be sadaqah. But you shouldn't make a habit of it. Do the hisab properly. You've got accountants, mashallah. You can do it, but it's a fixed amount. Sharia has specified. Any questions?
Okay, subhanallah.
Subhanallah.